So, in a world of 0-hour contracts, of flatlining or falling pay, large-scale unemployment, particularly amongst the young, clearly there's a need for trade unions. But I would say, given all of that stuff, clearly trade unions aren't doing yet the job they need to do to make sure that pay's right and that most people aren't living in insecure and anxious work. So I think there's a real challenge for the trade unions. I think those challenges are twofold. Firstly, I think there's the offer of the trade unions. What are they demanding for their members? And secondly, how are they doing it? On both of those things, I would say that trade unions are too much still mired in the culture and the demands and the issues of the 20th century when they need to transform themselves to become 21st century organisations.
I mean, the challenges are enormous. Well, we're looking at the biggest recession since the 30s. And 0 hours contracts and insecure employment are on the rise. I mean, we are responding in unison to these issues. We've been at the forefront of 0 hours campaigns, exposing home care and travel time abuses for workers not getting paid. We are trying to address the issues of employer fragmentation. It's an enormous challenge for us, and I admit that in the 21st century, our activists now face dozens of different employers instead of just one in the supply chain. We're using campaigns like the Living Wage campaign now to find allies in the community to try and push a fairness agenda and put pressure on supply chains and companies to behave more ethically. We know now, I think, in the trade unions that we can't always do it alone, and we are now in the 21st century, I think, looking for allies.
But in a sense, I think one of the problems is that the trade unions in Britain focus too much on symptoms and not causes. So it's always defensive. We've had the crash, we've had the squeeze on public spending, which has hit Unison more than any other union. One of my frustrations is the fact that the unions don't involve themselves in what the alternative economy is, what is responsible capitalism, because we end up just kind of clearing up the mess of companies that are too free and markets that are too free, rather than working out what is the new ways in which we can regulate these organisations so they don't end up causing problems that we just kind of keep clearing up the mess of.
Yes, I mean, there's many sectors of the economy where union penetration is low and where it's hard to find unions, unfortunately. What Unison is looking for is that the public sector and the government, in the way it commissions public services, tries to set standards in procurement and the way it does business in its supply chain, which has a positive effect. And we're definitely up for promoting measures which would benefit all workers on public service contracts, whether they're union members or not. We take a very wide view of public benefit in that respect.
And let's move on to the area of kind of structure and culture, because I think this is the biggest area of challenge. That in the 20th century, organisations like trade unions operated on kind of Fordist principles. They were centralised, they were reasonably kind of top down. In the 21st century, you've got organisations which are the shorthand is Facebook. That are the horizontal, that are flatter, where people have their own identity, they have their own voice, they have their own say, the decisions are kind of consensual and participatory. I think that's a big area of challenge for the trade union movement.
We are experimenting with new ways with large national employers like Barnardo's. We have tried to set up a virtual branch where the interaction is mostly online. And we are looking at non-traditional employment, how you organise agency workers, migrant workers and personal assistants, which is a growth area with an ageing population.
And look, I think this week at the TUC, in 2 weeks at the Labour Party, I think the kind of all of this crystallises around the relationship between the Labour Party and the trade unions. And I think there's a big opportunity now, and I think Unison's been ahead of the game because it always had a separate fund than the one allied to the Labour Party, that the trade unions become much more civil society organisations with the kind of alliances that you were alluding to at the beginning, online, with consumers, with people like UK Uncut protesting against kind of tax evasion.
Well, in Unison we've always had a split political fund. We work closely with pressure groups like 38 Degrees on some of the NHS bill campaigning and currently the lobbying bill. So I think we're ready for the 21st century and can adapt to the demands.